We're continuing on our second share. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is when Shemittah is. Okay? We're all prepared that Shemittah is coming in a couple of months. We're going to talk about when it is. Okay, so we said last time, there's certain mitzvahs that are dependent on Yovel. A number of mitzvahs, if I remember it was 7 also. 7 mitzvahs that are dependent on Yovel. 2 of them were Shemitah's Karka and Shemitah's Ksapim. That's what the ones that are relevant to us. And the first thing I wanted to point out was that those mitzvahs are dependent on Yovel, and most of us would think that these mitzvahs would be dependent on there being a Beis Hamikdash. We're more connected to that, but these mitzvahs are not that dependent on Yovel, as we said last time. And there's an exception to that. There is a mitzvah that's totally on the Beis Hamikdash, a mitzvah of these that's dependent on the Beis Hamikdash, and that is, according to the Babli, the reason why the mitzvah of Tosfos Shvius is totally on the being a Beis Hamikdash. Okay? That's according to the Babli. The Gemara says like this. The Gemara says there was a halacha Moshe Sinai. 3 halacha Moshe Sinai were given simultaneously. Okay, 2 of them you're more familiar with, Arava and Nisach Hamayim. Okay, and those are 2 halacha Moshe Sinai. And the one that we care about for this is Nisach Hamayim, that you pour water in the Beis Hamikdash on Sukkot. And together with that was the halacha of Eser Netiyas. Okay, Eser Netiyas, the exact details is not so important to us, but the halacha of Eser Netiyas is that if you have 10 saplings on the field, a very small tree, 10 saplings in the right size field, you don't have to do Tosfos Shvius for those. Okay, you're not mechuyev to do Tosfos Shvius for those when you have the right kind of a field. So we understand from that everybody else does have to do Tosfos Shvius. Tosfos Shvius means is that for a certain amount of time before Shemitah, you're not allowed to work the land, you're not allowed to do basically the malachas d'oraisa, you're not allowed to do during a certain amount of time before Shemitah. So, from the fact that Allah I have to tell you that for a field of Eser Netiyas, if it meets some special criteria, you don't have to do Tosfos Shvius. Teaches us that everybody else does have to do it. And the Gemara says that the fact that these 3 halacha Moshe Sinai were given simultaneously, they were given as a unit, tells you only have to do all of them when the other ones apply. And since without a Beis Hamikdash, you don't have to do the mitzvah of Nisach Hamayim, or you can't do the mitzvah of Nisach Hamayim, you can't do that mitzvah, therefore, you also don't have to do the mitzvah of Tosfos Shvius. Okay? The Rambam says, not everybody agrees with what I'm about to say, but the Rambam says that Tosfos Shvius means that for 30 days beforehand, you're not allowed to do malacha. That's the din d'oraisa, you're not allowed to do for 30 days beforehand. And the din midrabanan, Tosfos Shvius goes all the way back till Pesach and Shavuos, depending on the type of field that you have. Okay? So according to the way the Mishnayos say, the din of Tosfos Shvius, they would already be doing the mitzvah of Tosfos Shvius. There would be things they couldn't do already, because we're already past Shavuos, we're already past Pesach. There are things they wouldn't do because of the mitzvah of Tosfos Shvius. Now that there's no Beis Hamikdash, we don't do the mitzvah of Nisach Hamayim, we also don't have to do the mitzvah of Tosfos Shvius either. Okay, that's what the Babli says. That's how the Babli says it. The Yerushalmi learns it very differently. The Yerushalmi says the reason why there's no mitzvah of Tosfos Shvius is either because it's a D'Rabbanan and the Chum took it back, or the Levei Chacham argued on the original drushes. Okay, but that's how the Yerushalmi says it. But the Babli says, which is how the Rambam brings it, that there's no mitzvah of Tosfos Shvius nowadays because the way the halacha Moshe Sinai is given. Okay, so even though I've told you that there's no mitzvah of Tosfos Shvius, it's true. We don't have a mitzvah of Tosfos Shvius. We have a sort of mitzvah of Tosfos Shvius. Okay, and what I mean is as follows: there's a din of Arla, which is that when you plant a tree, for 3 years you can't eat the fruit from that tree. Those 3 years are not counted calendar years. I don't know how they say it. You don't count them as 365 days. You don't wait till, it's not like a kid getting an upsharon. You wait 3 days till his 3rd birthday and give him his upsharon. The 3 years get counted based on calendar years, based on when the tree was planted, counts towards a whole year, like it gets counted by Rosh Hashanah or by Tu B'Shvat, depending on what you have. So the thing is like this: if you plant the tree within 44 days of Rosh Hashanah, okay, that means from the middle of until Rosh Hashanah, that tree will be considered to have been planted in the next year. If you planted more than 44 days, it was planted in the earlier year, and it counts a whole year from before. And therefore, if you plant a fruit-bearing tree within 44 days of Rosh Hashanah, of Shemitah, then, let's say this year, in the middle of Elul, you plant a tree right before Shemitah, and within 44 days of Shemitah, that tree will be considered to have been planted during Shemitah, and that means is the 3 years of Elul will be counted till Shemittah will be the first, and then a year and two afterwards. So people looking back and calculating the early year for this tree will say, this tree was planted in Shemittah, which will look all wrong, because you're not allowed to plant trees during Shemittah. So in order to make it that it shouldn't look like you planted a tree during Shemittah, midrabanan, you're not allowed to plant a tree for 44 days, a fruit-bearing tree for 44 days before Rosh Hashanah. Okay?
Doesn't it usually take more than 3 years till a tree bears fruit?
Yes, it does, but
Only if you plant the seed, not to plant an existing branch. Correct.
Okay. So
this din of Arla is only planting an existing...
No, the din of Arla is you have to wait for 3 years. Some trees make fruit before you, some of them don't, or some situations yes or no.
You're scot-free.
That's fine. That's okay. It's not.
You're right.
In this situation, the point is
most people don't plant seeds, but you're still planting a tree on Shemittah, which is
right. The point is when people are counting, they say, is this the tree an Arla tree or not an Arla tree? They're going to keep bringing up, this tree's year is Tafshin Ayin Hay. They're going to keep calling it a Tafshin Ayin Hay tree and say Tafshin Ayin Hay. That was during Shemittah. Okay, that gives a false impression that you could plant trees during Shemittah. Now this one technically was planted before Shemittah, but Arla-wise, it was planted in Shemittah. So with Rabbanan, it's not right. It's not really Tosfos Shvius, but it's a halacha that applies before Shvius that extends the halachas of Shvius to days before. Into it's.
But as long as there is no Tosfos.
But this din does apply. This din, which is not a din of Tosfos Shvius, right? But
Tosfos Shvius doesn't apply this.
That's correct. But it has the feeling of Tosfos Shvius just because it's a halacha that applies before Shemittah that connects to Shemittah.
What's 44 days? What's the measurement?
14 days to take root and 30 days to grow. If I remember, or the other way around. Okay, so it only that din that I just told you 44 days is only for trees that are fruit bearing, not for vegetables, and not for non-fruit bearing trees. Okay, there's going to be others. We'll get to this in a later time. Who hold there's an issue to plant anything very very close to Shemitah if it'll start growing on Shemitah. We'll talk about that at a different time. Okay, it's a different. Okay, we'll talk about that by probably. Yeah. Okay. I don't remember. Anyhow, okay. So I told you, back to where we were. I told you that all these bunch of halachas, including Shemitah and Shemitah's Ksafim, don't apply, but there's no din of Yovel. Okay, so why not? Why isn't there Yovel? Because I told you, it's good. It's only when there's Yovel. So why Takis or no Yovel? So the Rambam says like this. He says you need two conditions in order to have Yovel. The first is you need to have the Yud Beis Shvatim have to be in Eretz Yisrael. They will have to be there. It's a machlokes where that means everybody from the Shvatim, most of the Shevet, even are represented from the Shevet. Okay, so one condition is there has to be people from the 12 Shvatim. And the other condition is that the Yidden, those Shvatim have to be living in their places. Okay, the Shvatim have to be in their nachos. They have to be divided in Eretz Yisrael appropriately. So that means is if all the Yidden in the world moved in to Eretz Yisrael and they all just lived wherever they wanted to, that doesn't count. They have to be living in the right places. Okay? There's an obvious question. I'm just going to mention it. No. There's an obvious question, which is, the obvious question is, Chaim Pinas's question. He says, I don't get it. He says, even in the first base of English, they never captured all of Eretz Yisrael. The Navi tells us many times about how they didn't capture all of Eretz Yisrael, and they didn't give it all out to everybody. There were lots of Shvatim, there were lots of Psukim telling you, this Shevet wasn't Yerush his part, and he wasn't Yerush his part. They never Yerush in their places. So what are we talking about? That you have to, you're not Chaim, there's no Yerush until you Yerush in it, when it's not true. I mean, then it never happened. They never Yerush in it. Okay, so he wants it happen.
By the time it did happen.
That they all had this.
Didn't start. Yeah, by the time
I can't. I don't know enough.
The Kashrus is it because it's only 14
doesn't that mean that maybe you don't have to have Yerush the entire Chelik, as long as it's part of the Shevet.
So he brings a riot. He brings a riot that not only have to be Yerush each Shevet, but each person has to know where they're going to live. Each person has to have their spot. Each individual person. Yeah, to be fair. So he said. So he wants to.
Yeah, one person is displaced.
So he wants. I don't know if one person is going to make a difference. But so he wants to answer is. He answers. The Rambam says in the beginning of Hilchos Trumas that before Yeshua died, he made Gerolas and gave out Eretz Yisrael to everybody. And the Rambam doesn't say this, but Chaim Kanievsky wants to say this. What it means is he even went to the point of saying, Beryl, your house goes from here to here, even though they hadn't captured that land yet. That they were Mechalik and Mamish down to the individual parcels. The Rambam doesn't say that. The Rambam just says he was Mechalik the parcels.
They know where they're living.
And they know where they're living is considered that they live there. Okay. Anyway, okay. So because of this, because of these rules that you have to have, because you have to have the divided up and know where they're living. So there was no Yovel. It took for 14 years. It took for the Eden until they did this, until they got to that point. After they got to the 14 years, they started counting Shemitah. They started counting Yovel. Mamela, if you look at the chart here, you'll see when they finally. So they started counting it in the year 2503. Okay, that was the year when they started the countings. Okay, which meant is that the first Yovel was in 2553, which by then they started counting in 2504.
Right.
The first Yovel was in 2553. By then they had already had a Shemitah, 6 Shemitahs, 7 Shemitahs by then. And then the last Yovel that they had in the first base Mikdash was in 3303.
There's an ratio. There's a cycle with that in the last Yovel.
Maskim. If I haven't said it enough time, I'm going to tell you the way the Rambam says it. Okay, they counted until 3303 was the last Yovel.
The Rambam gives his numbers?
He doesn't give the numbers, but he gives you the whole cheshbon of where things happen. That in certain places he gives you numbers, and I filled in the numbers based on those cheshbonos. And then the last Shemitah was the year before the Churban, and the Churban was of the first base English was in 3339, right after the year after they had Shemitah.
It does say it's exactly which day is Shemitah.
I'm learning those halachas. That's what we're talking about. We're right in the middle of that. That's
How
what
do you have the last Shemitah later than the last year? Once the lady Yovel is off.
No, they were still counting Yovel's years. It was the last one that actually occurred was in 3303. He talks about that. Okay, it's a question. Okay. Okay. When it came to the second base of Mikdash, okay, you just have to look at the chart. It's okay. Came when the Yidden went into Galus. When the Yidden went into Galus, that was the end of these mitzvahs midaraisa. There was most told there was no counting at all during the 70 years that they were in Galus. The Yidden were in Galus. In Galus.
Counted for Shemitah.
They did. Also, they did not count Shemitah.
They kept Shemitah, but you have to.
They did not.
They didn't keep it, but you have to.
No, so why should they come?
I
Tell me you start again from, even if the cheshbon was off, you started second base, you started again from zero.
Correct. Correct. Because they did not count it. Everybody holds that they did not count during those 70 years. Came the second base Mikdash. Okay, coming the second base Mikdash, they also did not have the conditions to have Yovel Midaraisa. Okay, they didn't have enough to have Yovel Midaraisa. But in the second base Mikdash, they did count. In the second base Mikdash, they did. Okay, during the second base Mikdash, they did count Yovel. Okay, they counted Yovel Midrabanan during the second base Mikdash. They didn't start that right when they came back. If you were following from the last one, that was the 70 years so you didn't came back. When Ezra came back, they started counting, and they had their Shemitahs and Yovelis. Midrabanan came. The year of the Churban was 3829. That was Taka Shemitah, and that was the Churban of the second base Mikdash.
Okay. The first year counts as 16.
So how many Yovels were there? 15?
You can count it. All right, I didn't count it up. I'm sorry. Okay, you can count it up. Okay, so what happened was an interesting thing happened during the second base Mikdash. They had Yovel Midrabanan, but they didn't have the mitzvahs of Yovel. So came the 50th year, the year that was counted as Yovel. Let's say the first one was in 3465. They had the mitzvah of Yovel. It was called Yovel that year, but they didn't do anything. Okay? They didn't do any mitzvahs of Yovel. Yovel has been
It was a freebie year because the next cycle was 8 years later.
Right,
so
correct.
They didn't blow the shofar.
Yeah, maybe they blew a shofar.
They disturbed the cheshbon of Shemitah because of this Yovel Midrabanan.
Yes.
How can you do that?
It's the other way around. No, yes, it's the other way. Yes, no, other way around. But that's our point here. There's only Shemitah if there's Yovel. You only count the only Shemitah Midrabanan if there's Yovel. So there was no Shemitah Midrabanan. Everything was a Drabanan. But they counted Yovel so that they count Shemitah, because that's the rules. You only have Shemitah if you have Yovel. So Midrabanan they made Yovel just so they could have Midrabanan. They could have.
What about the Shemitah that say there's Shemitah Midrabanan even the Yovel is not the Reiser? Aren't the Shemitahs like that?
Don't know. I don't believe so. Okay, so I shouldn't actually know.
Again, why was there no Yovel? Because they weren't in the
But they didn't have all the people there. They didn't have enough people there.
I mean, that I hold the water with the rice.
I don't remember.
Okay. Okay. Now.
They didn't have enough.
Now we're going to talk about now. I'm going to go ahead. We're now moving to what happened after the second base Mikdash. Okay. The question is, did we have Yovel after the second Mikdash? We don't. Before I tell you if we did or didn't have Yovel after the second base Mikdash, I got to explain to you why I care. What I mean is, if we're going to have Shemitah and Midrabanan, so what do I care whether there is or is not Yovel? Okay. So what's already been mentioned is that Yovel is there's two reasons why we need to know when there's Yovel. One reason is because we can't. The year of Yovel is a free year. That means to say is when you get to year 49, that's Shemitah. Year 50 is Yovel, and the next year is not the second year of the Yovel cycle, of the Shemitah cycle. It's the first year of the Shemitah cycle. So that means between one Shemitah and the next there are 8 years. Usually there's 7 years in between them. At one point, when you come to the Yovel year, there's a free year, and then you start your 7 years again. So knowing if there's Yovel affects when you can count Shemitah. Okay, and that's what we're going to see more about in a second. It depends. You have year 1, 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 42, 49, and then you don't have 56 is not Shemitah. 57 is Shemitah. Okay, because 50 is a free year. Like a not counted towards these cheshbonos, and then you go from year 1, you start again from 1. You're not up to 2 now, you're up to 1. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is the halachas of Trumas and Maasros depend on what year of Shemitah you're in. So the halachas are like this. For the first and the second year of Shemitah, you give the secondary Maasros that you give is called Maaser Sheni. Okay, you have to eat in Yerushalayim. In the third year of the Shemitah cycle, you give Maaser Ani. Maaser Ani you give to poor people. The fourth and fifth year you again give Maaser Sheni, and the sixth year you give Maaser Ani. So now, if we have Yovel, that again it affects the years of when Shemitah is. Knowing which year Shemitah is affects all the other years of which Maaser you have to give.
All the 1 year, the one cycle that affects.
Well, in other words,
if that's Shemitah the next, that's what you're going to do in the.
Right, but now that we had Yovel. Now that we had Yovel, and now next year is the first year of the Shemitah cycle, I give Maaser Ani. I keep readjusting. Well, forever now, I've now adjusted. It's now, if I keep going 777, the years of Maaser Sheni, Maaser Ani will get affected. Okay, Ruchai Kevsky has a question. He doesn't know what to say. He says, I don't know what to tell you. He says, what happened in the second Beis Hamikdash when they had Yovel, but Yovel, they didn't do any mitzvahs of Yovel. So which Maaser did they give them? But they didn't treat that year as anything special. It didn't have the kula that Shemitah has no Maaser, has no Trumas and Maasros on it. So which Maaser did they give? They had nothing. Right? There was no.
Why did they come make Yovel but not make the mitzvah say Yovel Rabbanon?
Very good question.
Why did they make Yovel?
Very good question.
Very hard.
2 years in a row.
Very good question. Right. So the answer is the reason why. So the Kashrus asked the question. He says, how come they made Shemitah Midrabanan if they weren't Midrabanan, they weren't going to do anything? So the simple reason is that they were doing it to keep cheshbon. Okay, because that's the way you count. Okay, but why? Without the mitzvahs, that sort of doesn't make sense to have a year and not do anything. So he says the Chazal were hoping that all the Yidden would come back, and therefore they kept it up, saying the Yidden are all going to come back, and we're going to have this mitzvah. So it was like a zecher to hold on to the mitzvah because Yidden were coming back. That was their hope that Yidden would come back. Only this many had come back so far. They hoped the rest would come back, and they would have it for real. Because.
So do the mitzvahs of Yovel. Do the mitzvah.
There's no
So the reason. The reason why they didn't do it. I'm sorry.
I didn't make everything.
I forgot to say. The reason why I can't believe I've got to say because it's a big part of the next thing I have to say is the reason. Two things right now. The reason why they didn't do it is because they held it was Gzeira She'ein Tzibur Yochel Amid. They held that they couldn't have 2 years in a row and be mechayev the people to have Shemitah and then Yovel right afterwards. Okay, that's what.
It's the same shaila in the Gemara mentioned the shaila Amun and Moav and Shviz. What they keep? They only Maaser Sheni. They didn't keep Shemitah.
Right. I don't remember if he brings right. I don't remember. Could be the right. I don't remember. Okay. So the reason was because it's Gzeira She'ein Tzibur Yochel Amid. Okay. So now the big machlokes that comes out of this was whatever I said to you so far is basically agreed upon. Okay. During the first Beis Hamikdash they had Shemitah and Yovel Midaraisa. During the second Beis Hamikdash it was the Rabbanan. The shaila was, did they have Yovel after the second Beis Hamikdash? Okay, after the Churban, the second Churban, was there Yovel? So what happened was like this: the 6 years after the Churban, there was Shemitah. Okay, 6 years after the Churban.
Yeah, Churban was Maaser Shviz.
That was in the last one, and so that was on the last slide. So in 38, 36 was that first Shemitah. Okay, came along. How many years later? Now there's a machlokes. Okay, the Rambam holds that even after the second Beis Hamikdash, they had to count Yovel, and the reason why is because very simple. He says the din is the Torah says you only have Shemitah if you have Yovel. So just like in the second Beis Hamikdash, they counted Yovel with the Rabbanon because if you don't have Yovel, you can't have Shemitah. So they had to count Yovel. So according to Rambam, in the year 3865, there was Yovel, just like in the second Beis Hamikdash. You're not mechuyev to have Yovel because you don't have all the conditions, but guess what? You're not going to have Shemitah either. In order to have Shemitah Midrabanan, you have to have Yovel Midrabanan. So according to Rambam, in 3865, that's what they did. They made Yovel Midrabanan. According to the Gaonim, who argue on him, they say after the second Beit Hamikdash, there was no more Yovel Midrabanan. And therefore, the year 3865, according to them, was not Yovel. It was Shemitah. I'm sorry, it was the first year of Shemitah. It was the year number 1 of Shemitah. Okay? And then came a couple years later, in the year 3871. According to the Rambam, it was just the 6th year of Shemitah. And according to the Gaonim, it was Taka Shemitah. Okay? So you realize what went on is we're losing every 50 years, we get out of sync by another year. Okay? Every 50 years, they're getting out of sync a little bit more. Okay? And this is what happened the year afterwards. Okay? And then came our first, we have a new word here, a conversion Shemitah. Okay? Which is to say, it came 350 years later. By then, they caught up to each other. Okay? Because they kept getting off by a year. Every 50 years, they got off by a year. Came the year 4172. By then, they both had Shemitah in the same year. So they had 7 Shemitahs in a row that they agreed with each other. There was Shalom by Yidden for those, that group of years afterwards. But that didn't, as you can imagine, it didn't last. Okay? So the Rambam says, here I am sitting in the year 4936. I'm writing Hilchah Shemitah V'Yovel. He says, and according to me, this year is Shemitah. Okay, if you follow the Cheshbon, if we do the Cheshbon in Excel, if it makes you feel better. Okay, if you follow the Cheshbon, in 4936, it is Shemitah right now. That's what Rambam says. He says, according to the Gaonim, this year is not Shemitah. Okay, because they were not in the convergence year. What? Say something?
No, it says year 1 Shemitah.
It is. According to the Gaonim, it was the first year. According to the Rambam, it was Shemitah.
Build some Shemitah there?
No. This is the Rambam was writing his sefer. Okay, he's writing his sefer. Okay,
we're in the 6th year.
Okay. So if we keep on following the Cheshbon, we'll find that the most recent convergence was in 1812. That helped the English year. That helps you remember in the year 1812. 5572. That was the last time that there was a convergence, and it went for that many years. Come next year, according to the Gaonim, next year is going to be Shemitah. Okay, Tafshin Ayin Hey is going to be Shemitah. According to Rambam, it's going to be the 3rd year of Shemitah. And no shaykhs, we're nothing to do. Okay, we don't nothing to do here. According to Rambam, the Shemitah is in a couple years from now. Tafshin Ayin Tes. Okay, that's when it's going to be Shemitah. And the next convergence is not going to be for a while, for another, I don't know, you forget how many years. Another 150 years. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you in 1 second now. Okay, so this is big machlokes. Okay, this is a very serious machlokes. When Shemitah, we have all these mitzvahs, got a whole packet of mitzvahs. I'm going to talk to you for who knows how many times. We have a whole book here, right? I'm going to tell you about. Well, we don't even know what it is. Okay, so this is a machlokes, and the Rambam says like this. The Rambam says, this is the whole chart. The Rambam says like this. He says, I have to tell you something. He says, I think that I'm right. He says, but the thing is like this. He says, Shakabol v'amaisa. What people do, what we see in fact, in practice, what people are doing is amudim gedolah b'hira. It's a very significant factor when you're passing in the shayla, ubehen royally towards, and that's what you should, hang your hat on. That's what you should decide based on that thing. And therefore, Hagam that I think that I'm right, Hagam that I think that the year that I'm writing, I forgot which way it was. It was or was not? Was it? The year that they're writing the Rambam, he says, I think that this year is Shemitah. Lamaisa, the people living in Eretz Yisrael are not keeping Shemitah now. They keep Shemitah based on the Gaonim's Cheshbon, and so therefore Hagam, that I'm convinced that I'm right, even though that I think that I'm right when Shemitah is, you should do what the Gaonim say. Okay? Oh, so the Rambam writes in his sefer. They write, in the Mishnah Torah, it says, Hagam, that I think that I'm right, that this is what it is. I mean, that's what he holds. I told you what the Machlokes is. Aval Pikem, we should follow according to the Gaonim. Which is in fact what we do. Okay, everybody knows that Tafshin Ayin Hey is going to be Shemitah. It's only going to be Shemitah according to the Gaonim, which is the accepted cheshbon of how we count Shemitahs. Okay, what Rabbi Eismach mentioned, I'm almost done with this part. What Rabbi Eismach mentioned was that, in fact, it is a Machlokes Rishonim. Okay, the halacha is that Shemitah is based, there is no Yovel nowadays. We don't count Yovels, we count Shemitah just every 7 years. But this point of, and the next point I'm going to say also, this point of which year is Shemitah, and many of the things we're going to talk about is going to play into Heter Mechira. Okay, people are going to mention and say, maybe this year's not even Shemitah altogether as a contributing factor. Okay. Yeah.
I'm sure that you're aware in Tzvas, though, at the time of the Beis Yosef, there was a whole thing about that. And the Beis Yosef, right? It was a whole argument and everything, but there was a Ralbach
We're going to talk about it.
Okay.
We're going to talk about it. When we get to, we have a while till we get to that point. That yes, that was also included to the chesed
But they
which
felt
is
like the Rambam. They're passing like the Rambam. That was
Mitch, I hope we're going to get to that. Okay. If not, you'll have to just you'll remember. Okay. Okay.
Rambam doesn't ask for Rambam.
Right. Okay. So I mentioned to you. That's why I couldn't believe that I forgot it. I mentioned to you that the Rambam says the reason why in the second base of Midrash there was they didn't practice Yovel. They counted Yovel, but they didn't practice Yovel because the Gzeir she'en atziv yochel amid. Okay. And that's a Tosfos.
So they couldn't hold for 2 years?
Right. That's a Tosfos. It comes from a Tosfos. So the Shema asks a question. The Shema says, I don't understand. He says, it says in the Chumash that if you keep Shemitah and Yovel, the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to take care of you. He says, so what does that mean? It's Gzeir she'en atziv yochel amid. What do you mean they wouldn't be able to handle it? The Rebbeinu Shalom says he's taking care of you. That's the mitzvah, is to say, the Rebbeinu Shalom, you take care of me. I'm not working like you told me. You're going to take care of me. So what do you mean we couldn't handle it? What do you mean we couldn't handle it? When we say we're not allowed to, Chum didn't want to make Yom Kippur to be on Friday, because you wouldn't be able to cook for 2 days in a row. Friday and Shabbos you wouldn't be able to cook, because you're not allowed to cook. You're going to be really hungry. How many cold cuts can you eat on Shabbos? So you want to have some hot food, so you won't be able to eat. So, okay, it's Enativ Yochlam, but they rearranged the schedule that Yom Kippur is never on Friday. Okay, but what does it mean, Enativ Yochlam, when the Rosh says he's going to take care of you? So what's the problem? Yeah, what do you want to say? Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So the Shema says, Elamai, you see from Tosfos, that Tosfos holds that the Havtachah, the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to take care of us when we keep Shemitah and Yovel, is only when Shemitah and Yovel is with the right. So that's what the Rebbeinu Shalom said. He said, you do what I said, I'll take care of you. You do what the Chacham said, I didn't say to take care of you then. So you're on your own. Okay, so therefore it's not going to say Shemitah and Yovel. Okay, I have to tell you. I have to just tell you, that's not my question. My question, but I don't understand about it, just philosophically, conceptually. I don't know, is that, well, what did the Chacham have in mind? The Chacham told us to do a mitzvah. I mean, it's suicidal. I mean, they told us to do a mitzvah that for a year we shouldn't do any work, and there was no Havtachah behind it. We're not getting anything. We're on our own. I don't understand it. How are we supposed to take such a mitzvah? The Chacham say, do this mitzvah for a year, don't work, and you're on your own. What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to start carrying Hashvias, start collecting money from people? What are we supposed to do? What does the Chacham have in mind?
It's a question on Keren HaShvius itself.
It is, but it's a question on the Shema. The Shema says, we're going to hear other sheets in a second. The Shema says, when it's a din d'Rabbanan, there is no Havtachah. The Rebbeinu doesn't take you. Well, what are the Chacham having? What are they thinking? How can they tell people to do that? How do they tell people for a whole year, you're supposed to starve, and what do they expect from people? To us, maybe we're biased. We're used to, the Rebbeinu says, if you do the mitzvah, I'm going to take care of you. So we figured, I figured, if the Chacham said do the mitzvah, then he wasn't going to take you somehow. I don't know how they knew to do that, but sort of you think it would be built in. Sort of, it's hard to understand, so on a hashkafa perspective, not halacha, hashkafa, how did Chacham tell you to do a mitzvah? I mean, it's even 1 year, it seems to be Enativ Yochlam. You don't forget about 2 years. But that's what the Shema says. Okay.
Very good point.
We find like, Vayam Shema, the whole pasuk, if you do the mitzvah, Hashem will take care of you, right?
Okay.
Most we don't really find that. There's no poor people studying. There's no poor people. We don't really find that in Lamaisa.
Therefore, no. But at least the Rosh says,
except Shemittah, that's only if at all times. So let's give you Shemittah 100%. So
I have no problem that we shouldn't be taken care of. But then, why did the Chacham make such a rule?
Again, one's not telling the other.
Wait.
If you have a chiyuv to do a mitzvah, one's not because.
How can the Chacham make such a mitzvah that's forcing everybody to starve? What would they have in mind when they told you to do that? What were they thinking how could they tell you to do something and not, if you say the Chacham knew that the Rebbeinu would back them, and if they say to do it, the Rebbeinu will take care of you, I understand that. To say, we're going to say it, and there's no one behind it. Fine. The Chazon says, no, that's not what Pshat. Okay? He says like this. He says, you should know. He says, the Havtachah, the Rebbeinu is going to take care of you during Shemitah. That Havtachah is a kloliistic Havtachah. It's a general Havtachah for Klal Yisrael. Chazanish. If you keep Shemitah, the Rebbeinu is going to take care of Klal Yisrael. But there are two exceptions. Does it mean he's going to take care of every single member of Klal Yisrael? Okay, that means overall the Rebbeinu is going to take care of us. But Beryl might not get taken care of. He's maybe on his own. And second of all, which is related, is that there are people who theoretically would be entitled to be taken care of because they're keeping Shemitah, but they have other averas that are holding back from them being taken care of. So they get punished for other reasons. And therefore like this. Lamaisa is, if there are people who would be in really desperate situation, because they sort of got pushed out from this Havtachah, they won't get it, they will be allowed to do Malacha and Shemitah. They will be allowed to. It'll be a sakana, they'll be allowed to do Malacha. So now, by the time 2 years are up, only very few people are going to be left. By the time 2 years are up, Shemitah and Yovel are going to still be in the Havtachah. In other words, lots of us will have enough schusim to keep us going through one Shemitah. To go Shemitah and Yovel, that was way too much. The Chacham said,
the Kashrus.
yeah, he says it gets to the point of sakana, they wouldn't be able to keep Shemitah anymore. So what's going to happen is, it will be Enati b'yochalam b'y mean. When Taisa says Enati b'yochalam b'y means is, the tzibur will not, we're sticking in order, will not have the schusim to be taken care of for 2 years. And therefore Chacham said, you know what, this is how much hishtadlus you're required to do. Chacham have to judge these things. They say, hishtadlus of 1 year no Shemitah, that's within range of people's doing, and the Baruch will take care of them. 2 years is already beyond what that is, and they won't get taken care of. Okay. Now, the truth is, if we were reading Tosfos, not that we knew the Sema and the Chazon Ish, I would think we would have read it differently, which is, excuse me, Tosfos is in Gittin. Okay. They just learned it. So we would have said it'll drop differently, but just like this. The way I think of it is that if you're a farmer, and the Chacham tell you not to take care of your field. The Torah tells you not to take care of your field. And you gotta have Havtachah. Don't take care of your field, the person's gonna take care of you anyhow. You'll be okay. And that's fine. You'll get taken care of. Lamaisa, there's a tremendous nisayon for that person to not go out and work his field. The money's in the bank, but there could be even more money in the bank. I could go take care of my stuff. I can, grow more things. I could have more things. So we could have understood that the Ein Hatzibu Yochalam means is people wouldn't be able to withstand the temptation. The Chacham say for 1 year keep Shemitah, they get used to that. Every 7 years, for 1 year we don't do it. Now you're telling me for 2 years I should leave it, not because I don't have the money in the bank. I have the money. I'm okay. The Baruch take care of me. I'm fine. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to withstand the mitzvah and be able to hold on to it for 2 years. Okay. Now, me. That's I would. I'm saying Taisa said Enati b'yochalam boy. No, Taisa says Enati b'yochalam. Okay, we're trying to understand what Taisa said. So that's okay. Now, the Tumim says a pshat. It's almost exactly what the Sma says himself. Okay, the Sma is not saying like Taisa. Okay, it's almost exactly what the Sma says. He says it's a little different, but okay, it's almost the same thing.
How does it sound like Taisa?
The Sma brings Taisa, and he says his own pshat. He says is how come they didn't make
it's together with Taisa. You should say it's Yachalaba. The question of Taisa is, what do you mean it's Yachalaba? You have Havtachah. Right. The answer is there is no Havtachah.
That a hezbollah in what Tosfos has answered. Right. Now it's not to say his own answer as to why there's no Shemitah D'Rabbanan. Why?
He's saying that part now.
No. Now we're about saying a new one. Okay. He says like this. He says when Yidden were in Eretz Yisrael during the second Beis Hamikdash, the Chachamim had Yovel. The Chachamim had Yovel because even though you weren't mechuyev to keep you weren't mechuyev to stop working your land, you were allowed to work your land, but Yovel had a certain sense to it. And that's because, at the end, what am I saying? Okay. The Chachamim, I take it back. The Chachamim, after the second Beis Hamikdash, made a mitzvah. I'm not sure what I'm saying. After the second Beis Hamikdash, the Chacham made a mitzvah of Shemitah. The Chacham made he's answering Tessa's Kashrus. Okay, back to where we are, and I know yeah. How come there is no mitzvah of Yovel midrabanan nowadays? How come there's no mitzvah of Yovel? So the Tosfos said the reason why there's no Yovel is because it's Xavier Shena Tzibi Yochalam. The Sma says the reason why there's no Yovel, the Tumim says the reason why there's no mitzvah of Yovel nowadays is because after the Churban of the second Beis Hamikdash, everyone was living out of Eretz Yisrael, or I should say, big parts of Klal Yisrael were living out of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore the mitzvah of Yovel has no meaning to people living out of Eretz Yisrael. The mitzvah of Shemitah has meaning to everybody because we have the mitzvah of Shemitah's Ksafim. At the end of Shemitah, we'll find a way at the end, the last thing over there, we get at the very end, we're going to find out that even people in Chutzar have a mitzvah that relates to Shemitah, which is Shemitah's Ksafim. At the end of Shemitah, your loans basically get canceled. So the Chachamim made a mitzvah midrabanan of Shemitah because Shemitah D'Rabbanan applies to all Yidden. Yidden living in Chutzar have a mitzvah of Shemitah D'Rabbanan also. In Chicago, there's a mitzvah of Shemitah because come the end of next year, we won't be able to collect loans from people. But the Chachamim didn't make a mitzvah of Yovel midrabanan because the mitzvah of Yovel midrabanan has no meaning to most people. What do you do on Yovel? What do? You let
The Avon.
evidence. There's no evidence.
We jubilee.
We jubilee. Nothing. That doesn't mean anything. So if during the okay, I'm not going to say that part. But so therefore the reason why the Chacham made it is not because of inactivity of Amboy, because the Etzem of Russia would have taken care of us. We would have made it through 2 years. But they didn't make a din of Yovel because it has no meaning. Once we'd sit there, we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves. It would affect how we count Shemitahs, but we wouldn't do anything special in the midst of the year of Yovel. So Chacham didn't make it, but the mitzvah of Shemitah has a meaning. Even people living in Chicago would have the mitzvah of Shemitah to do Shemitah's Ksofim, and the Chacham would be able to make such a mitzvah to Rabban because that would have some meaning.